Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today we're here to talk about Little Big Adventure, Twinsen's Quest, the remake of the original game from 1994, I believe. It has been a very long time, and I have recently finished the game, and I played it on Nintendo Switch. I did play the original demo on PC, so I've got quite a bit of experience, both the original game and this. And I've got to say, it's been a while since I played a game that's just kind of made me smile from ear to ear. Yes, it is a remake, but this is so different to the original game in terms of what's changed. The core story and the core places you go are identical, but there is so much else around that that's changed that really makes this feel like a remake that was needed. Because as much as I like the original game, there is a lot of stuff that just would not fly in today's sort of market of games. So I just want to talk about my experience first with it. Like, I loved the original. I don't think I ever finished the original, to my knowledge, which is kind of crazy because I must have got quite near the end. But this game isn't necessarily a long game either. It's very much like a 3D sort of isometric adventure point and click. It's the best way to describe it, and I say that because you are going from place to place a lot of the time, trying to find people, trying to find items. It's like, you could say like Metroidvania in the sense that you need this item that then gets you to this item and then gets you to this item and whatnot. But it reminds me of like point and click sort of story based things, because you're like, oh, you need to go and find this person and have that conversation, and as you're walking around you can talk to other people. And the game basically is set on these different islands around that you run around in, and you have to basically use Twinsen, the main character, to figure out that some things are not right, and you end up going to these different islands to do different, essentially blow up a lot of stuff. You would probably be considered, you are a rebel, or you join the rebels, and you are blowing up a lot of the evil Dr. Funfrock, which is a really strange name, but you're blowing up a lot of his factories, and you're basically trying to stop him from getting to the god being of this world, essentially the mother of this world. And the game does it in such a joyful way. Like, you go and you meet lots of characters around. The world is set with different types of characters. So you've got like humanoids, you've got grobos, which are elephants, you've got rabba bunnies, you've got these little spheros. Like, the game's got a lot of charm to it, and this game does a lot to add to that charm of the world. So, like, for example, one of the biggest differences is the aesthetic of the game, which has got a very paper/craft aesthetic, I think. The original game is very early 90s graphics at this point. You'd have to cut side-by-side comparison to see the glow up, but this is a very different art style, so it's kind of hard to compare. But what it does do is makes the world pop. It's an interesting art style, and I think that really helps to show off, hey, this isn't just another isometric game. This is why we've gone for this art style, and I really like it. I think the game looks clean. It's very, for the most part, there are a couple of issues with some of the, because it's isometric, because some of the angles and things, some things can be a little bit hard to read, but for the most part it's a very easy game to understand where you're going and all that. So let's go through like some of the biggest changes, art style obviously being one of them, but not the only one of them. One thing that has changed that I think is a little bit divisive for some people is the story. So in the original game, Twinsen gets captured because of these visions he's having, and essentially they're prophet types of dreams, and he gets locked up, and then after he gets free, they capture his girlfriend Zoe. That's not the case here. They've actually changed the story where his sister Luna gets into trouble. He tries to save her, and then by doing that, he gets captured. Zoe in this game is someone who is much more in with the rebels. She's still in the game. She's still Twinsen's girlfriend, but she's much more of a not powerful. That's probably the wrong word. Much more like, just isn't a damsel in distress in the same way. Luna isn't a damsel in distress in this game either. Luna's very much like got a lot of pep, and even though they take her away, she just constantly berates the clones and Funfrock and things like that. So yeah, they changed that up. So that's quite a big change, which means that the dialogue's obviously changed, which is another big thing. Like, some of the dialogue's still the same, but a lot of it's changed, obviously re-recorded, new or different. The guy that voices Twinsen does sound very similar to the guy that originally did it. So I don't know if it is, but he does a good job sounding very much like him, which is cool. But that is a big change. The story beats themselves are still the same, but like the who's where and the characters and all that have changed. I specifically remember in the original game there is a point and in this game where you have to make the water in a particular town taste good, and you go and speak to this particular bunny rabbit, and they've changed the lines, and they've made it a female character now instead of this male one, which is fine. I don't really mind that. I think that's like, it doesn't have an impact, but the line that they changed is kind of sad because it was quite quotable. But overall, you're still getting the same story. There's still funny lines in there. Some of the voice acting is ridiculous, which I kind of appreciate. It's very hammy, but all in all, like, you're still getting that experience. You're still going to the same places and doing the same things. Probably one of the biggest changes to the entire game is that the original game had 4 modes. So 4 modes of movement, sorry. So you had normal, which was walking, athletic, which was running, sneaking, and then aggressive, which was how you punched and stuff. Now, these 4 modes also affected you have this magic ball. They also affected that. Well, all that's basically gone now. So you can run and you can walk, so they're still there. You can change how you throw your ball, which is high and low, or high and aggressive as I like to call it. So your normal bounce with your ball is very straightforward, goes quite far forward, whereas you can turn it into the old sneak mode, which is very up and over, and they both have their uses, and they're both very, 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 they open up options, which is cool. And then the other thing was aggressive. They got rid of that, and they have a button that is dedicated to punching, or later on you do get a sword, to attacking. So while it was a very unique way of doing things, it's kind of hard to appreciate how much of a modernization this is without playing the original game. Now, I'm not saying the original way of doing it was bad. I liked it, it was interesting. But the controls feel they are very modernized, they are very tight. You can run around, you've got more control. You've got a dodge roll in this game, which is something you didn't have in the original game. And I can see why, because now that the game is no longer static screens, which we'll come to in a minute, and when you're fighting things, sometimes you need to be able to have that extra movability. So I kind of appreciate what they've done with the controls. I know it's going to upset some people because it had a very specific control method, but I think this game does a lot in modernizing and making this game significantly more approachable in today's markets, which, I know, again, not everyone's cup of tea, but I really enjoyed it, and I like the original as well. Like, I would play the original and I would play this. So that's one big thing with the modes. I said no longer static screens. In the original game, you run to the edge of the screen to move the camera, and you go to the next screen. In this, it's bizarre because the camera basically stays on you. And that is a huge change. If you want another example, it's like Resident Evil. You know how if you've played the original Resident Evil, you would go to a different screen and the camera angle would change, right? It's not quite like that. That was more like the second game. But you do have to run to the edge of the screen for it to then go, boop, right, here's the next screen, deal with that kind of thing. Whereas this, you don't have that. Which makes it very interesting running around near enemies, because you can definitely tell that some enemies activate when you get close to them. Some will activate further away. And I have a feeling it's to do with some of that proximity in the original game and how they try and get them to react to Twinsen when you're running around. But I really appreciate the fact that it now is free-flowing, and it really adds a level of, like, you get to see so much more of the game and the map. And I feel like the developers probably, because the guys that made this game are some of the original developers, the original composer is definitely involved, and then some more recent people. But, like, I really appreciate what their vision is for this game, and being able to see that realized in a modern look and a modern overhaul is awesome. So those things, so the static, no longer static screens, the modes are gone, being able to, you know, dodge roll, the story being changed, things like that, and then you have the updated music, which is really cool. Very much appreciate that, and then you've got the updated voice acting. Really brings this game to a modern audience. Now, like I said, this game isn't particularly long. I think a playthrough will probably be between 8 to 10 hours, if I'm honest, because back then in the 90s, games weren't that long. But I think 8 to 10 hours is probably where I would say to someone, you probably get through it that. If you know what you're doing, you can do this game in about 2 to 3 hours, I think. because it's fairly straightforward, and there are shortcuts that you can, if you know where to go and who to speak to, you can kind of do that before you go off to the next island, and you can kind of skip some of the backtracking, which is cool. I'm glad that the game lets you do that. This game is quite backtracky because you're sailing from islands, going back and forth on different boats and whatnot, and that's part of the experience of this game. It's not, luckily each area isn't massive, so it's not like you're going to have to like run from, halfway across. It's not like a modern day game that's huge and you're like, oh crap, I've got to run back and do this. It's not that. The game does a good job of not putting you that far away from where you need to be, but there is backtracking there. But ultimately, I think the package is a fun one. Now, I played this on Nintendo Switch. I bought it for that, and there are a couple things that are worth mentioning. The Switch version definitely has some frame rate dips. I think the game runs at 30 frames anyway. Has some frame rate dips at certain points. Isn't a huge problem. There's only a couple times when it does become a problem, which leads on to my next issue, which is occasionally I had a couple of control issues where my Twinsen would jump twice or something, or sometimes the input would be eaten. Now, this only really happened in one area, and that's the Temple of Boo, which is probably the one area of the game that still kind of sucks. It's never been my favorite area. The color schemes definitely didn't help. I'm colorblind, so certainly that do matter to me. There's some bits we have to do some isometric jumping onto some platforms. It's just difficult. It's a difficult part of the game that could have been improved in some other ways. I think you could still make it challenging, but it is a little bit cluttered. It is hard to see what you're doing, and I would say that's probably the lowest point of the entire game. I think when you get there and you have to go through it, is replaying it, I'm like, it's not like long per se. It's just fiddly, and I think that's an area that could have done with a better update. But apart from that, that was really the only place where I had like sort of control issues. It just that part was must have been very intensive. The other thing that's worth noticing is the load times in areas of this are kind of long in some places, specifically going from inside a building to the outside. Now, it didn't bother me because I was like I said, I was having a blast. I'm incredibly biased to this. I want to make that clear. Like, I loved this game. I loved this remake. This was a remake that needed to exist. I am so glad that this game is now on all these modern platforms in a version that people can play. So, despite those issues, and they are issues, don't take it wrong, like, having frame rate dips and control issues and longer loading times are going to be something you need to consider if you want to buy this on Switch. But for me personally, I wanted this on Switch from the when I knew it was happening and I knew it was coming to Switch. I was pre-ordered there day one because I was like, that's the experience I want to know. I will probably pick this up on PC as well. If you are an old fan of this game, hopefully this is something that you can enjoy in this modern era. I think this game does a fantastic job at modernizing this game for a new audience. I am so glad it's on multiple platforms, and just ultimately it is a game that has a ton of charm, and it made me smile from ear to ear replaying through it. I can't wait. I never really played the second one. They said they want to remake the second one. I am going to be there day one. And potentially there's a new game in the works once they're done with the second game. I hope that we get all of that. This is not the sort of game that you're going to get nowadays. I mean, you might get some stuff in the indie scene, but this game is very, very iconic for what it is and for what it does. And even though it might not be as well known as it was back in the early 90s, it was a classic PC game that people just really knew. I also own the original version on PlayStation 1. I have a copy of that physically as well, which is something I treasure because, this game isn't exactly the easiest thing to pick up now. But yeah, if you are interested in an adventure game that does have combat but is mostly exploring and telling a story, I do recommend this game. It's not particularly expensive. It's about £25, I think, is the RRP on this. It's on Steam, it's on Switch, I'm pretty sure it's on PlayStation. I'm not sure if it's on Xbox, hopefully it is. But if you want a smaller, tighter experience and a really, really wonderful remake that has a lot of charm to it, then don't look no further than this new version of Little Big Adventure. Anyway, that's going to do it for me today then, guys. Thank you so much for watching, as always. If you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description, as always. And until next video, I will see you then.